How do you show up with personality while still being seen as professional? And I'm thinking about sense of humour. Like, can you be funny and professional? Well, we're going to be talking about that. And I'm joined by Steph Clarke for this episode. We're also digging into a bunch of other listener questions. Is it okay to leave your job without knowing what you're doing next? How do you build credibility and trust at work after making a big mistake? And how do you manage up if your manager isn't great at communication? We'll be covering all of this on today's pod. Let's go. This is a podcast about making work work. You'll learn about leadership, career growth, and how to navigate those weird work challenges. I run a HR consulting business called Boldside, where I help leaders build epic team cultures. If you lead a team or run a business and you think I can help, let's connect on LinkedIn. My name is Shelley Johnson, and this is Work. Steph Clarke, welcome back to the pod.
Thanks.
I feel like we need the ding, ding, ding round, whatever round we're up to.
Yeah, depends when this one goes out. So yeah.
It could be round 6. Okay, so we've got some listener questions. We're going to just choose wherever we want to go. You've got a list in front of you. I've got a list in front of me.
Shouldy.
We're going to start here because this has been on my mind a lot lately. And so the question is, how do you show up with personality and still be seen as professional? How do you do this? Because this has been something I've been thinking a lot about, and I'm posing it to you first.
Okay, great. I have in my head my friend Mike, who's a psychologist and is just brilliant at this kind of stuff. He would have so many different ways of being able to frame this and be oh, well, actually, it's this thing that is happening in people's brains, and that's why. And I don't have that. So sorry. You need to get Mike on to actually ask this one. But I remember him saying to me once, because we were talking about how this is years ago. We were talking about how wearing something. He was giving someone advice about turning up to an interview and always wearing kind of overdressing a little bit, which great, sensible advice. And I was like, oh, is that still relevant? I was like, Mike, does that feels a bit like 1990s kind of? He was like, no, some people can get away with not doing that because they are exceptional, and they are able to just immediately kind of grab the status or the whatever it is that makes people kind of forget that they're wearing something kind of
just a t-shirt.
Yeah. Or maybe it's not even that it's untidy or anything, but it's maybe off kilter from what you would expect from that person. But that is probably not the grad on their first job. It's probably someone who has got something behind them and some other bits that they can use. So I think there is that, again, with so many of these things, there's the kind of it depends, and the context is important as well. And it depends what job you're going for. And it depends but personality, and I think this is where I think this sort of question touches to the cult of extroversion. Because for me, I read that and I think, oh, whoever has asked that maybe is feeling like they can't be as big as they want to be because maybe they're working somewhere that's a bit quieter or where that's more the norm. So I don't know, there feels like personality is so many different things. It doesn't need to be big and ritzy. It can be just who you are, and that's good.
I've wondered, for me personally, can you still be seen as professional and be funny?
Oh, okay.
So my version of this and my interpretation of this question is, how do you bring that sense of humour to work? How do you bring the light, fun parts of yourself but still be seen as professional? Because you know how sometimes if you feel like you show up with a level of cheekiness, of being able to really make people laugh, does that undermine or undercut your credibility? And I wonder as well, and this is, again, this is just purely vibe, no research that I'm referring to in this, but I also wonder as a female if that's impacted, because I think about some of my friends who are in exec roles who are guys who are super funny and seen as super professional. And if I tried to do the level of jokes that they do, I would wonder, would people question my professionalism? And so I'm just spitballing here going, I don't like that. I want to be able to be myself. I like to have a laugh. I like to be have fun. But sometimes I've wondered, does that undercut my credibility?
But I think it only works, and being funny, as a funny person myself,
I love when we're like, we're funny. We are funny. And it's like, no, we are. So just trust us on that.
That's also, that has basis and research.
Yeah,
like
that is empirically proven.
Yeah. You've got to, for your funniness to work, you have to be able to read the room. So if you're going in and like being like, in a situation that is absolutely should not have that, like then you're not being professional and you're probably using the wrong part of your personality in that moment. Now, I definitely probably err on the side of anything can be funny, any situation, there's time for a gag, like you're fine. And that's sometimes not the case. Like there are definitely situations where you've got to know the people, you've got to, whatever it is. But last year I did a project with a board and an exec team, and there was some like high tension kind of parts as well. There was some stuff that was kind of hard in those, some of the facilitation of that and some of the topics that we were kind of covering. And one of the board members sent me a testimonial afterwards and said that I was really fun to work with. And I was like, great. Like that's what I want. And like for this like quite serious engineer, accountant to be like, oh, it was a really fun journey and like it was really fun to work with Steph. I was like, great. Like that's what I want. And actually that is part of my professional brand, is that do really good work and ask really provocative questions and do really hard things. And it can be fun as well. Like those things are not mutually exclusive.
And that's the thing, I guess, is like, how do you have these things coexist? I like the call out of like reading the room, because that then if you've brought your full personality to work but you haven't read the room, that maybe not every single part of you need to come into that meeting, then like that is going to undermine your credibility and professionalism. Are there ways that you have learned to do this where, and I think it's especially relevant in where you feel you have to promote yourself. Like, let's say you are going for a job and you feel like, what's going to give me the best opportunity of success here? And so you might feel, well, they might want this person, the suit, the button-up, whatever, and so I'm going to tone down these aspects of myself, which to me feels a little bit like masking. Now, I get the nuance of this because we talked on a previous episode about how bringing your whole self to work versus bringing your best self, like how do you work out the difference between the two? As I'm rambling my way through this question, has there been things that have helped you work out how do you show up with personality? Because you do have an amazing big personality that is what makes you you, which is also what attracts people to want to work with you. How do you find the have you gone through a process to work that out for you personally?
Usually when I'm sussing someone out and they're sussing me out, I'm doing the dog sniffing thing, the dog sniff conversation. It's lots of observation and it's because there'll be tells in the other person pretty quickly around, are they up for, like how quickly can I kind of go there a little bit with like some jokes or, just being able to kind of, wind some of those things in, which is more my style. But also are these people I can work with as well? Because if I have to be like so buttoned up for the whole thing, is this even a project I want to be able, can even do my best work on if we've got to kind of completely shut all of that down? Like I don't know if it is. And I can do that, of course. I've had to, many times. But if it's going to be a long project or someone I'm working with on ongoing, I don't know, like I have to want to work that out. So I think it is lots of observation and reading the room of being like, okay, are they making, stuff like, are they making a joke? Or are they kind of, how are they thinking about that situation? But also, even when someone is really serious, sometimes I'll kind of just like do a little test. And I can't think of a really good example, but just to kind of see, and it might be repositioning the problem they're having or something, but in a kind of slightly more flippant or sort of slightly more humorous way to see if they're like, oh God, yeah, is that type of thing. Because then if they kind of lighten up around the problem, I'm like, okay, they're up for actually, which is what the work we would probably be doing together, which is getting under the surface of what's really going on. And you can't do that if you're just going to be like super serious about it, I don't think. Like you've got to be able to call the weird stuff that's happening. You've got to be able to call the odd human behaviours or the messiness around whatever it is. It might be a really technical problem, or it might be a kind of an interpersonal problem, or it might be something, probably a combination of the two. But I think unless you're going to kind of put some more colloquial language around these things and have some fun with it. Like, it's hard to actually, in my opinion, and again, for the way I like to work, it's hard to actually then get people to really describe what's happening if you're just all really using really strict kind of technical language. I don't know, like, I don't know if that really makes sense, but I just think you have to read the room, you have to kind of observe, you have to kind of ask them and just start to use different language to see how they respond to that. And then sometimes you'll be like, oh, okay, going to wind that back, or actually I can go a bit further.
I had this moment. We were running I was speaking at a industry event for women in mining, and the thing I love about mining, you can be so cheeky.
I bet,
in that environment, and you can just immediately looking at the room, seeing how much they one tell for me is like, do they laugh easily?
Yeah, absolutely.
And in the morning when they're all gathering, there's heaps of laughter, quite a bit of banter. So I was like, cool, these are my people. Like, we're gonna be fine here. And but if you compare that to some other environments I've been in, like some financial services businesses that are maybe a bit more serious, like not all, but some of them have been, where you might taper that off. And I love now that you've kind of articulated, hey, yes, bring the personality, but read the room at the same time. And know, if you think of it like there's a mixing desk in the corner over there, and I heard someone talk about this recently of like you're dialing certain things up and dialing it back to get the best out of the room. And I think that's communication 101, reading the audience, reading the room. Yeah. And so just as you're prompting that, I'm like, okay, cool. Yeah, that makes total sense. I do think examples where sense of humor in particular, I think it is such a valuable thing to be able to cultivate in your working life, because it's also, and I can't remember who the researcher was that did this, but there was a bunch of research around the link between resilience and your sense of humor, which makes sense, right? The ability to laugh.
Yeah.
I think one thing, if we just dig into this for a moment, when it comes to sense of humor that I've found a useful lesson has been, for me, I've probably erred for self-deprecating humor.
Oh, same.
Works heaps better than when people use sarcasm. I reckon that it lands, it can land in a really unhelpful way if you're sarcastic.
As a Brit, I find that really offensive.
Well done.
Yeah, thanks.
It can land if people don't read that as a cue, like sarcasm can be really difficult for people to read.
Yeah, it can. Yeah.
And so,
especially, and again, if you've got a multicultural audience as well, it gets even harder. Like, definitely in the UK, you could get away with a lot more.
Yes,
because it's normal. It's like it's our love language. So, whereas here, it's definitely more mixed. In the US, absolutely not. Like, you just cannot. Yeah. And self-deprecating humor doesn't work in the US either. Yeah.
Whereas I think with Australian self-deprecating humor,
it's kind of fun.
But so I don't know if you've had any lens on like the impact sense of humor has on even your own personal resilience at work.
Oh yeah, I mean it's just in life, you've got to be able to laugh at it. And I remember last year, my boyfriend and I, there was like a lot of like just stuff going on in life and all the rest. And one of the things we both kind of said to each other is, we really like how even when we're having a really hard conversation or something hard is happening, we can, like, one of us, normally me, can still laugh about it. Like, we can still have, like, be like, oh, well, at least that's a bit, whatever. Like, there's always like a thing that in the middle of a hard conversation, I'll be like, oh, and, like, I'm sure some psychologists will be like, oh, you're deflecting from, whatever. Like, you don't like to be in the uncomfortable. Like, sure, but actually it means we can stay in the conversation probably a bit longer. Because we're able to like hold elements of it, or I'm able to hold elements of it more lightly.
But it's a pressure. It's almost like the
pressure valve.
Pressure valve where you go. We on our team, anytime something bad happens, which is just the course of work, bad stuff happens, and it'll be like there was this one situation that was particularly bad where I felt I'd really like dropped the ball on something, and we'd gotten into this pattern. Anytime a bad thing would happen, we'd be really unpacking the problem, like going, oh, this is so bad, or this happened, and like trying to debrief what was wrong. And one of us will just be like, oh, well.
Yeah.
But it's become this line of like the worst situations, and we'll just laugh because we're trying to say, oh, well, but really we do still care about it deeply. But it's, I don't know, you have almost like these things when you work with a team of what are the go-tos for us that help us relieve an element of tension
and
also
still be able to have the conversation.
Yes.
Yeah. And not just walk away like, we didn't actually resolve anything. We had a good laugh, but nothing's actually been solved. Like, you've got to be able to do both. And same with, the other thing I was going to come back to is you've almost got to know or be able to sense pretty quickly, what does professional look like to the other person? And so for some people, like, very quickly, I'll be like, oh, okay, hold it all back a little bit more and then warm up. Because they may be coming across a little bit more straight and narrow and stuff like that. Whereas, that's less of my sort of style typically, but I can do that because I've spent a long time working in professional services and working with clients, and that's just life. So therefore I can like hold those things in a bit more, warm them. And for me, that is like my favorite challenge, is being able to kind of like break people. No, it's being able to
the sarcasm.
Yeah. Being able to like warm them up enough that then you're like, oh yeah, they're gonna have a laugh at some point. We're gonna be having slightly more using some different language or whatever it is. But I'm not gonna go in with it because it's not about me. It's in those moments. It's about like, especially if I'm doing a one-on-one with a board member or an exec team member before we've actually kicked off the project, like as part of the kind of discovery kind of like prep kind of stuff. Like, I want them to trust me. So I need to kind of work out, well, what does trust look like? And therefore, what does professional, whatever language you want to put around it, what does professional look like to them? Get a sense of that and be like, oh, okay, I need to be this sort of person. Now, when you've then got all of them in a room together, you need to be able to like be all of those things. And that's, again, like that is it's a dance I really like doing. Because I love to be able to sort of win over or like, kind of, and again, not from a kind of weird power kind of dynamic kind of thing. Again, psychologists would be having a field day, I'm sure. But so that everyone feels like they are being heard and we're having a good time and we're getting through things, but they're doing it in a way that kind of works for them as well.
I really love that idea of thinking about, and even what you said there, it's not about me. So understanding and listening. And you can get a few, if you're asking some good questions in that first one-on-one with that board member or that exec team or whoever it is for you listening right now that you're like, okay, I want to get better at this. By hearing the way they speak, by some of the body language, those cues, you can quickly work out, okay, how do I need to show up that's going to build trust in this relationship? Whereas I imagine, Steph, and I know you and I are probably both somewhat similar in this way, where you crave deep chats up front and then when you know that person's there for it, like I met them 2 minutes ago and I know they want to have a deep conversation. You're like, yes, so good.
The other thing as well, and another, I suppose, a dynamic I think about is the fact if a leader has brought me in and they have got a really big personality, when I'm doing then the one-on-ones with the team or whoever, the stakeholders around that project or that workshop, I will dial it down a little bit initially because I'm very aware that if you've got people in a team who are less big personalities, maybe a bit more introverted, bit kind of quieter or whatever, if there is some friction in that team because that leader has a really big personality, almost the last thing I feel like those team members will want to see is someone else. Oh, well, of course they've brought her in because look, she's just like, leader with the big personality. So I want them to also feel like I can kind of be who they need me to be as well in that moment. So I'll often kind of just try and not, augment to make sure that they know, oh, okay, I'm not just here because I'm also really loud, or I'm not super loud, but I definitely do have a bigger personality. But I don't want to just be seen as, oh, well, you're just here because you're like them.
And I guess that's the difference. When we talk about influence and how you build your influence and how you read the room, I think sometimes people hear that and they think, oh, well, is that being disingenuous if you're flexing that muscle? I kind of think about it as like you're tailoring your communication to get the best out of the group.
Yeah.
And you're tailoring your style to help a group reach a certain outcome. So it's in service of that group versus sometimes people listening might be like, well, if you have to adapt how you are you being manipulative? Are you being this, that, the other? What's your response as you're hearing that?
And I know we've talked about this already in another episode, so I'm not sure if that's before or after this one goes out, but I always think of it like, well, when you go and see your grandma or a grandparent or a older person in your life, do you act the same way with them as you do your friends, your siblings, some other group of people? Probably not. Does that mean you're being disingenuous in all of those different situations? No, also not. So therefore, why is that different to then if you're working with a group, if you're working with different leaders, if you're working with different colleagues or whatever, having to kind of mold and shape yourself in those different situations. Because we can't just go through life being like, well, I'm just me. Well, I'm just being me. So I'm just going to be me to everyone. And you'll be different parts of you, and you'll be more or less of different parts of you at different times. The mixing desk analogy, which is quite a good one. But we need to be less about how we want to be, I think, sometimes, and a bit more around what does everyone need from me in this situation, and from each other as well.
I love it. I think it's amazing just thinking about, well, okay, a couple of things. I think for anyone listening, you absolutely can have personality and be professional. And it's working out, okay, well, how do I just get good at reading the room? And I kind of think one thing where this stuff has felt particularly relevant is when you're in a certain role that feels like it wants to censor your personality. HR is a good one.
A
good example.
Who was it that did that post? Someone did a post about this recently. Anyway, sorry.
I think Matt McFarlane did a post about HR people not being able to be funny, and that's crap. Like he was saying,
he's just wrong all the time, isn't he?
No,
Matt?
He was saying people and culture people need to bring their personality.
Yeah, okay, right, fine. We'll let him be right.
So he was absolutely right that time. The last time, if you listen to our last pod, we said he was wrong. Love you, Matt. Love your work. And he's a glorious, glorious human. He was saying for a lot of HR people, they feel like they can't bring a sense of humour to work, and that's a tragedy because they actually need to be able to do that.
I mean, choose your moment. If you're laying someone off, like, don't be like, make a gag.
No, that's right. Then. But still, like, you can bring your personality. So I feel like BYO personality to the role, but also choose your moment.
Yeah. And don't force it. And I think that's the other thing as well. Like, if you're like, oh, and I need to be funny to then be able to, and you're just it's probably not going to go well. And some people just aren't funny people. Obviously not us. We wouldn't understand. We don't. That doesn't resonate for us.
Who can possibly understand?
Yeah, no, exactly. But what I've heard from is that I've read about people who aren't funny. And therefore, don't if you're not funny, don't try and be funny necessarily. It's not the be all and end all.
Okay, so I love that. I'm still laughing. Sorry, I'll gather myself and try and be professional. Actually, where would you like to go to our next question?
Do you want to grow in your career? Are you after a fresh start or some inspiration? Or perhaps you're in a career crisis? The book Sort Your Career Out and Make More Money by Shelley Johnson and Glenn James is such a great resource at any stage in your career. It will give you practical strategies for things like getting a promotion, making more money, moving into a leadership role, taking career risks, or if it's time to quit your job, and so much more. You can find Sort Your Career Out and Make More Money wherever good books are sold or via the link in the podcast show notes. It's also available as an audiobook.
I feel like I have thoughts on this number 8. Is it okay to leave a job without knowing exactly what I'm doing next?
Okay. Are you asking me or you want to jump in first?
You go first, because you asked me first on the last one, even though it was your question.
Because I went into preparing for this podcast thinking I was going to ask you first on everything. Is it okay? Yes, it is. Is my opinion.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm biased because I've done that. So I'm like, yes, everything I've done in my career to date is right.
Yeah, this is the model.
I have done it, and I can tell you it's fine. I believe it's right based on the context. I mean, for me, when I did that, I left a job without knowing what I was going to do next. Everyone who's listened to this podcast has heard probably that story. And it was the conditions that caused me to make that call because there's obviously a risk. So everything comes with trade-offs. If I'm really happy in my job, I'm loving it, I'm not probably going to go and quit my job without anything to go to. The preconditions for leaving a job without knowing exactly what you're going to do next, for me, were the job that I was doing was crushing my soul. That's how I would describe it. Anyone who's had that experience will know exactly what I mean. And I was probably in the worst state in terms of my mental health that I'd been in my life. And so I just knew I've got to get out of this job. And the trade-off is the income, I don't have an income. I have no idea what I'm going to do, but I know that I can't stay. And that was the right decision for me.
Yeah.
I think there could be a lot of preconditions for people that cause this to be the right move. you've got to work that out. And we have talked about fear setting, Tim Ferriss's model. I did a heap of that before. So working out, well, if I quit this job and I don't have another job for 12 months because I can't get a job, whatever that might look like, what will I do?
Yeah.
And I probably gathered that my worst case scenario was I would be without a job for 6 months. And so I had things in place, mitigation strategies to make that okay. I had emergency fund, all these other things. And I used that time, I think, wisely. But that would be my initial take. It's like, don't just do it without having done any pre-thought. And the fear setting exercise, we'll put a link into the show notes about Tim Ferriss has a really good blog on how to do that. But where I would worry is if someone's like, I'm going to leave a job without anything to go to, without having done any of that work because they're pissed off in the moment. They're like, get me out of here, and they just rage quit.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
Yeah, all of the same. I think it's totally fine to do that if you've done the work for it. Or if, like you say, and I've seen someone close to me have that exact situation, they were just in such a bad place because of this job that was having a horrible effect on their physical health, their mental health, their, everything, that made it almost impossible to even think about going home and then like applying for another job. Like they were just in such a hole that they'd forgotten what they were good at as well, because they were in such a toxic, miserable environment that then they went home, basically went to bed because they were just like, that's it. I'm like, just couldn't do anything else after spending the day at this awful place. What they did, which I thought was quite sensible, and again, isn't always an option for everyone, is they actually went down to I think 3-day week for a period of time, which just meant that they actually had a couple of days to almost just, it was almost like that was the recovery period or start of the recovery period, because they then had 4 days to kind of recover rather than just 2 from the week, the weekend. They still had to have this horrible experience for 3 days, but it felt much more manageable, and it meant that they can almost like recover their energy and their kind of bit of their mental health to then be able to go, okay, what do I want to do next? Start applying for some things, putting yourself out there a little bit around, going to interviews and stuff. But that was such a miserable spiral for them. And they kind of needed to quit a bit earlier than they were maybe needed to. But they then also use that time to like build up some funds and stuff as well. Because in this economy, I'd say that is probably a terrible decision to sort of rage quit. Because it just feels like the market at the moment is, and this is obviously a point in time kind of thing, is very difficult. So going out on your, deciding, I've spoken to a few people who are like, oh, I've been made redundant, I'm going out on my own. I'm like, they're like, where should I start? I'm like, probably 2 years ago, but that's obviously not possible. So in terms of like, building new networks or whatever it is you need to do, and the funds and everything to do that. So yeah, at the moment I'd probably err on the side of caution, but yeah, it's totally fine to do if, like you say, you've done that pre-thought and planning.
Are there things that you feel, just going to that networking idea, I don't know who said this, can't remember, someone did, around you have to build your network before you need it.
Yeah.
And I have wondered about that, like just hearing that example you said of like someone going, I'm going to start my business. How should I start to build a network? How do you start building those connections and that community before you need it? Like, do you have ways that you've done this, Steph? Because you've got an amazing network where you've built that organically over time before you've actually felt like, oh, now I desperately need the next job or the next thing or whatever.
There's a couple of things, and again, they worked at the time. I don't know how relevant this is anymore, but I'm going to share it anyway, so in probably about 18 months before I knew I was going to leave my previous job to go out on my own, I started posting every day on LinkedIn. And what was really interesting is that over that period of time, people would come to me like, oh, are you doing your own thing now? Like, what are you doing? And by the time I actually was able to do that, and then the other thing I started doing, so did that for kind of 6 months of that 18-month period, and then went down to a 4-day week so I could start actually building my little book of business before I went out on my own. And so started to build a little, I had a few clients that I was working with as well, and just started telling people, I'm going to do this thing, and not in a kind of like spammy way or anything, but just made it really obvious that I was available to work with. And I'm pretty good at staying in touch with people and sort of staying, kind of connected and things. And, not always perfectly, not always with everyone, obviously, because that's impossible. But using those kind of strengths of being able to kind of stay in touch with people, find out what they're up to, being really generous and kind of either in advice or, help or in some way, or connecting them with other people. And that, I think all of those things were super helpful and meant that really for most of the time I've run my business, work has kind of come to me on the most part. And, not because I've done nothing. I'm still posting really regularly. I'm still doing all those things, staying in touch with people, et cetera, et cetera. But on the most part, that has meant I get a lot of like word of mouth type business and repeat from clients as well, which again is the best kind of work you can have because it means people like working with you.
I think that key word there that stands out to me is generous. Like being generous with your network and community is so valuable because, and I know it's that, what's his name? Robert Cialdini, maybe. I could be wrong. The book's called Influence.
Oh, it is. Yeah, I think that is.
It's a classic, old school book, but they refer to it as the law of reciprocity.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And this might sound manipulative as I'm saying this, and you never do it with
I'll let
this.
you know.
Yeah, you can let me know. You never do this with the intention, but the whole idea is the science behind when you're generous, people feel they want to be generous back.
Yeah.
And so I know like Adam
But you're
Grant,
being generous for the sake of being generous.
Yes,
Not for the
not
sake
to
of
get something.
Yeah, it's the give and take. It's the give and take.
Yeah, I was going to talk about. So
And I think as well, without this turning into like a Joe Rogan podcast, because we're now talking about Tim Ferriss again. Like Tim Ferriss had this thing around increasing your surface area for luck to stick. Like, what are you doing to increase your surface area so luck, the things that suddenly come your way or the things that someone sent, whatever it is, can just stick to those things that you've put out in the world. And my friend Leanne Hughes, who's amazing, you should follow Leanne. Her and I use this all the time. We just call it sticky luck. Like something will happen and we'll be like, oh my God, I had this like great sticky luck moment. And it's all because of something we did 3 years ago, 5 years ago, 2 years, whenever it was. But we don't do those things being like, oh, in 5 years' time, this will pay off. You do it because it was a nice thing to do. Like I spoke to a friend the other day who I introduced to a client probably 3 years ago because I couldn't do some work. But I was like, oh, you should talk to this person. They do a great job. She's still doing work with that client. She's like, oh, it's been like probably my biggest revenue client for the last year or so. I was like, that's amazing. Like they're both having a really good outcome. And that makes me feel good. Like that's great because they're both having a nice time. Clients getting what they need. They're having a good time. My friends doing great work with them. Great.
I think going to the intent there of you're not doing it with the thought of return. You're just genuinely being generous. But it's a mindset that I've seen with like really, really successful people that they've just built that consistently in their career and they've just been one of those people. And those, I think you see how over time, I love that sticky luck idea of like
cool, isn't it? Yeah.
things come up later on and you're like, oh, well, I never did that with an intention of thinking that would come back.
No.
But
because also you can never predict the way some of these things are going to come back to you. They're all so circuitous and kind of random in some ways. You're like, oh my God, that conversation with that person, and then, oh, here we are, we're doing this. Stuff like this is an example of that.
I love it. I think that's amazing. What's your next question? Where are you going to go? Oh, I like this one. Number 10. How do you rebuild credibility or trust after making a mistake at work?
You asking me or are you answering?
I've got plenty of examples, but I'd like you to begin.
You've got to own it. Like you've got to own it, and you've got to own your part of it as well. Not just that the thing went wrong. You've got to own the thing that you did that made that thing either go wrong or get worse or whatever it is. There's which book? Thanks for the Feedback by Sheila Heen and Doug Stone. I use that book and reference that all the time when I'm talking to teams and things. And they talk about your second score. So the first score is like how you did the thing, and the second score is how you respond to the feedback about the thing. And really, that's the one that kind of matters most. And the amount of times when I was in-house in organizations, I sat through the promotion process and the kind of performance review type things. And the thing that set people apart that were, those people like neck and neck for the promotion or whatever, or they were kind of, in a performance conversation, the thing that more often than not set one person apart from the other was the ability for them to have taken on feedback or have fixed a problem or have responded to something in a way that could have gone really south. But they didn't because they owned it and they responded to feedback or whatever it was. So I just think, your ability to be like, oh, the way I tried to resolve that, whatever, just did not work. And this is what happened. This is what happened with me. And maybe even asking the other person, like, what would it look like to kind of, maybe even acknowledging like this may have, obviously affect your trust in me or something like that. What would it take to rebuild that? What do you need from me in this moment? And sometimes it's just time. Sometimes it's just like, actually, hopefully they've got enough evidence for you from other situations that they can go, that was a bit unusual from you. That's not what I expect. So, there might be a bit more, the trust bank account has been withdrawn from somewhat, but it can be, by being consistent in the other good things that you do, you can kind of rebuild that pretty quickly.
I love that question. What would it look like to rebuild trust for you?
Mm-mm.
I think it's a beautiful question to ask, and I haven't thought about, because usually my go-to would be, here's what I'm going to do to fix it. But it's but the fix could be different based on that person.
Yeah. Yeah, because I might be like, oh, we're good. Whereas the other person be like, oh, you've got work to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I guess it's different. One thing I think there's kind of like a two-step process. Step one, own it and own your part, not, don't external.
The thing happened. Yeah.
This thing happened, but go, I did this thing that led to, because I think that personal ownership is what people want to see, and they love that level of accountability. But it's not it doesn't stop at ownership. It's ownership and corrective action. And I like that question, because the corrective action in my mind might be, I've got to go back and fix the process. But in their mind might be, hey, we actually need to have a check-in point midway through this type of project. Whatever they think it is. But it can't just just the step one, owning it, putting your hand up, I own my part. Step two, here's the action I'm going to take, and what action do you feel like needs to be added in?
Yeah. And maybe even there's a sub point there around asking them what their experience of that was as well, because, your experience of it is probably different to theirs, and that might be different for the different people as well.
And if you're a catastrophizer,
yeah,
which I think a lot of our listeners are, they're like so many perfectionists.
Is that based on the questions you get or something?
So many beautiful overachievers who are perfectionists. I feel like we could create an archetype.
Yeah. And
they're catastrophizing. They're like, I'm going to get fired for this. And really their manager's like, oh, that's fine. I don't even care.
Yeah. Yeah. So often. Yeah.
But
I've definitely had that. Yeah.
I do love that idea of, what did you say the Sheila Heen quote was? The first...
there's the first score, your first score and your second score. So it's your first score is how you did the thing, in that situation, the project, the meeting, whatever it was. But your second score is how well you responded to the feedback about that. And that feedback might be direct or indirect. It might be the thing that blows up around it. Or it might be directly hey,
this wasn't good enough.
Yeah, someone having a conversation with you about it. So, and it's the second score that kind of matters more, because that's the bit that people will probably remember, is how you fixed the thing afterwards or how you responded to the problem.
Which is why defensiveness is one of every manager's pet peeve.
Oh, yeah.
It's just not a quality that will be linked to people who are high performing. If you're defensive to feedback, that would be one of the single biggest derailers of your ongoing performance and career success.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so... Wait, is it my turn or no, it's your turn?
No, my turn. We've got what? We've got one more? One more, yeah. I really like this one around how do I manage up, especially when my boss isn't great at communication.
So how do you do it?
No, I asked you.
Yeah, okay. I've worked with a few really amazing people who are super good at this. One of them, I'm just thinking of some examples, and I'm relating myself as sometimes my communication can be chaotic to my team. Yeah. She's had firsthand experience. What did we say? We laughed.
What?
About the communication is either...
Oh, it's either all at once or not at all kind of thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it'll be 21-line messages.
And then nothing for 3 months.
And then an audio message of just the weirdest things
that have happened that day.
I appreciate you rolling with that though. Okay. One thing that you do really well is you do reach out. You'd be like, how are you doing? You're on my mind. I love it. Anyway, that's an aside.
Thanks.
It's a lovely quality. Okay. Okay, so one thing I've seen people do, this one person who comes to mind for me is really great at managing up. At the end of her week, she would say, hey, Shell, here's the big ticket items that I know you care about that have been done. Here's the things where there's roadblocks. you may be the road, like I may be the roadblock, but like pointing it out. And then next week we really need to hit these 3 things. I'm like, oh my gosh. I found that I didn't ask that person to do that, but they just did it. And it was like, it made my life so easy. But it also, to me, because there was communication gaps from my end, I'm like, oh crap, I'm the roadblock. I haven't given her these answers on X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
So next week I need to make that a priority. The other thing they did really well is they know, and because I'm very open about my strengths and weaknesses, they know, okay, this is a skill gap for Shell, and that person's really good in that area that I'm lacking in. She would come prepared to meetings with stuff that really fills the gap, and I'm like, oh my gosh, going back to generous, I found that quality super generous. So one thing would be like she would prepare this like just a financial report and like walk me through it in a way, and I don't know why, but it was pretty simple stuff, but I felt so supported by that person. They were covering a gap for me, a skills gap, and they also were able to let me know, you're holding up stuff here and this is what I need from you in order to get the outcomes that I actually cared about. I'm trying to say this though in a way, I talked actually with Chad Lawson and I did a podcast on weaponized incompetence at work. And like it was a really fun conversation.
Yeah, that would be. Yeah.
And like I feel
talk about it at home as well. So.
Well, yeah, because it's like very much at home people talk about weaponized incompetence, but it's certainly present at work.
Of course it is, yeah.
And it's like that idea of I'm trying to know how do I not weaponize my incompetence, but then the generosity of that person in the way they manage up. So that's my own personal example. What do you think?
The way I have dealt with that before is by not expecting the other person to suddenly be better at it, because they're not. That's probably not that's not reasonable. So for me, it's more around being super explicit about what I need or what they need from me. Because sometimes that's the problem, is actually you don't know what they need from you. And then you end up kind of going through this like weird dance of no one really getting what they need and everyone getting a bit cross about it, and then it being a problem. So with some people, it's been a case of being like, okay, this is where we are. And depending on the situation, but like this is where we are in the project or whatever. Where do you think we are? Does this match what you think? And like actually just being like really like much more detailed and like sort of specific about it. And it depends as well, like is the person not good at communication because they're like a big ideas kind of person and therefore they're not into the detail, and you're like, well, I don't really know what you want from me on this thing, in which case you need to kind of bring them down and be like, look, I know you don't like this. However, in order for us to get to a big sort of shiny kind of cool thing, there's a few things we need to work through. Can you bear with me on this and like actually kind of like be explicit about it? Or there's just some other like weird kind of miscommunication, and actually just like calling that as well and be like, hey, I feel like you're not really getting what you need from this. I'm not really getting what I need from that. What's missing from your perspective? I can then share what's missing from my perspective, and then we'll probably come up with what's missing and kind of move on from there. And then maybe the conversation around how do we need to work together to avoid that happening in future or in other situations, because that's not ideal either. And I've had that with people before where actually we just didn't get on very well either. And we both knew that. Like, and we were really open about the fact that we didn't really like working with each other. But we had to. And sometimes, and most of the time we could like ignore it, or work around it. Probably every 6 months or so, we'd get really upset with each other and would have to sit down and be like, okay, we're doing that thing again. What do we need to like exercise?
Wow.
And then, right, what do you actually need from me? What do I need from you? Why is that annoying me? Why is that annoying you? Here's why. Okay, good. Same as usual. Cool. Yeah, I'll get you this thing by the end of the day.
So are you saying, just to dig into that for just a moment, got to the start, are you saying a manager you worked for or someone you worked with, be it a peer or whatever, you both knew you didn't like working with one another?
Yeah.
How was that for you?
It was fine because we both knew, like no one was pretending that we didn't. And again, this is this was one particular example. There's definitely other people I've not liked, of course, but this one was like quite obvious, and we both like kind of knew, and we're like, yep, this is the situation. We don't really like each other. We don't really like working together. The dynamics of the roles and stuff as well didn't really make sense to either of us. So anyway, it was just like a whole bunch of things. And
was that like a peer or a manager relationship?
Well, that was part of it. It was kind of peer, but she thought there's a bit of that as well. She thought she was
not
a
a good one.
Yeah.
Not a good. Like, and also goes to like when there's those weird power dynamics.
It was a mismatched power dynamic because I kind of, for owning my part of it, I kind of rejected that power dynamic. I was like, you're not the boss of me because these other people are my boss, are my kind of thing. I have to give you information on stuff, but that's all. And that person did not really like that I rejected her power. Look, it's not great. We both owned it. It's fine. So, yeah. And so, therefore, we would kind of work around that as best we could. And then, like I said, once or twice a year, we'd be like, things are like worse. So we would go and have a coffee.
I thought you were going to say we went to the car park and sorted it out. Not quite.
No.
But it's interesting where these dynamics of how do, like, I mean, I like that example of just being okay of going, we don't necessarily have to like each other in order to be effective.
Yeah, exactly. And were we a high-performing team? Well, absolutely not. But we didn't really. But we didn't really need to be. Like there was this like dotted line between us and her role and my role, and it just needed to work enough because that wasn't really where I was getting the biggest. That wasn't where I was making the most impact in the work I was doing, in the role I did have, and the teams I was working with, and the people who were actually my bosses and managers and things. So I could kind of like, okay, well, if I'm doing a good job with them. Like, that's what actually matters. And sometimes you've got to, like, own that and be like, this is the stuff that matters. That stuff doesn't. And, I tried not to be, like, awful about it.
No.
But, yeah.
I think it's good as well, the trade-offs in working relationships that, some are going to be when you've had really good working relationships and you just benchmark those as, like, but not every relationship has to be like that.
No. Sometimes you just have to tolerate each other.
And like every 6 months say, okay, we've had a little hiccup. How are we going to make this functional?
Exactly. Yeah. And it was very much about that. It wasn't like, how can we be great? Like it was always like, all right, what do you actually need from me right now? What do I, kind of thing. Okay, great. Move on. Yeah.
I love it. Hey, I have loved, we've smashed out a bunch of pods.
We have.
Over the last.
This has been great.
I know. And I could talk to you all day and we've gone over on every single episode.
Oh, we're on time on this one. I think
we're on time on this one. I want to say thank you so much for hanging out. People are going to want to connect with you and your Business 28 Thursdays. So you do facilitation for executive leadership teams on the future of work or futures thinking and strategic planning and all that kind of stuff. Where can people find you?
Find me on LinkedIn on the most part, which is, you can look me up as Steph, Steph Clarke, Clarke, don't forget the E, and then Futurist, and that usually brings me up. And you can find me on Substack. I have a podcast. Well, it will soon be a podcast, but here we go, exclusive.
Oh, yes.
I have a Substack called How to Friend. You can find me there, and I also have another Substack called The Bookmark, which is more around what I've been reading, listening to, watching, thinking about recently as well.
Steph also does like a weekly conversations she's been having, and one of my goals is to get in there as regularly as possible.
You've been on there a couple of times.
I do enjoy. I love that post because I always get the giggles every time. Hey, I just want to say thanks for hanging out.
Thanks for having me.
And if you enjoyed this episode, 2 things. I want you to share it with someone who needs to hear it, and I'd love if you can give us a 5-star rating on Spotify or Apple because that helps us get the pod out there. Thanks so much.
If you have enjoyed the show today, forward it to a friend, colleague, or family member who you may think it would benefit. Shelley's business Bold Side provides leadership training for a variety of different businesses. To learn more, visit boldside.com.au. If you would like to book Shelley to speak at one of your events, please reach out to the team via moneypodcast.com.au.